you very much. So without further ado, I would like to invite Miss Hayat. But before that, let me introduce Miss Hayat first. Okay, Miss Hayat is an ESL teacher with um, 8 years of working experience. Okay, she graduated with a bachelor's degree in TESOL from the University of Portsmouth, UK, and obtained her master in linguistics and English language studies from Universiti Sains Malaysia. So her research interest is in language and psychology, specifically on linguistic markers of depression. And thus her sharing will be about this very interest of hers. Okay, so Ms. Hayat, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to extend my gratitude for inviting me to share about my research, something that I am really passionate about. And the title of the research is Linguistic Markers of Depression, Insights for English Language Tweaks Before and During the COVID-19 Pandemic. As we all know, the pandemic affected all of us mental health negatively, with depression being the most prevalently reported cases worldwide. And in fact, there is a study on Twitter that reported depression as the most used word on Twitter somewhere during the pandemic. And given that language use changes in tandem with the change in the social reality during the pandemic, we were interested to find out whether we can observe any linguistic differences before and during the pandemic. Research concerning depression on social media has been looking on the behavioral changes before and during the pandemic, but linguistic changes among these people who are the most vulnerable to the negative impact of the pandemic is still under research. And given that the pandemic had exacerbated symptoms of depression, we were interested to find out whether we can detect someone's psychological state from the language they used before and during the pandemic. So before I go further, I would like to ask every one of you to read this quote by Bucci, 1984. Okay, this quote tells us that more than a persisting feeling of sadness, depression is a mental disorder, a cognitive dissonance, whereby a depressive patient is unable to decode appropriately what they are feeling, and therefore the symptoms would affect not only the structure but also the meaning of their language. So that is the interest, the core of this research and what this research is all about. And this is my background. Thank you very much. This is this is my outline of today's presentation. First, I will actually go through the background of this research and will bring you to the research questions. The most interesting part, I think, is the methodology, because I feel like being invited to a corpus research network is like a fish out of water, because I am not actually using corpus linguistics, but rather a word counting strategy, which is something I believe is quite new to a lot of us in linguistic field. And after that, we will move to results and discussion and conclusion, and also definitely a Q&A session when we have finished. I can't really see you because I am using my own slides on my computer. So I will attend to all of the questions if you have any in the chat box after I have finished this session, or you may just unmute and interrupt me. Okay, that is cool. All right. Okay, so what is indeed linguistic marker? Linguistic marker is a concept that is not very used in linguistic field, to my surprise. And linguistic markers, as its name suggests, it is actually a linguistic identity or a marker of identity of a person or a group's identity. This idea comes from Eckert and McConaughey, who posited that people who share some similar characteristics, like those who are suffering with depression, may exhibit similar linguistic styles. And then the pioneer, we say, in terms of psychological language use, which is Penbaker, who is Penbaker. Penbaker says that linguistic markers are linguistic fingerprints, so it marks your identity. And he argued that linguistic markers are subtle and you cannot actually see it with your naked eyes. It is very you use it subconsciously or almost unconsciously, that that you might, that it is not really observable, right? And then more recently, there are people who suggest that linguistic markers are identification of traits, whether you belong to a particular group or identity, and whether you could be identified as a member of a group or identity. And the bottom line here is that linguistic markers are indicator of individuals or a group linguistic identity. And by definition, they are cues or patterns that characterize an individual's language as being different than the others. And a depressed, for example, a depressed person from a non-depressed person, or a depressed person before the pandemic, or from the same depressed person during the pandemic, for instance. But what are some observable linguistic markers if someone is depressed? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, these are the previously identified linguistic markers of depression so far. And one of the most prevalent ones are first person singular pronouns. First person singular pronouns are regarded as the hallmark of depression. It means that if someone actually uses a lot of first person singular pronouns in their speech or in their writing, it is most likely they are depressed. And these are actually consistent with a lot of research. And in fact, more first person singular pronouns are found in poems by poets who committed suicide compared to those who did not. So it means that it can be said that the more severe the depression is, the more likely they are going to keep talking about themselves. And approaching suicide, they use fewer first person plural pronouns. So it means that they are more disintegrated from the society. They are more disintegrated from feeling that they belong. And this has fallen back since 1981 by Bucci and Friedman and Weintraub. Weintraub is a physician who encountered his medical interviews and found that depressed patients typically exhibit higher rate of first person singular pronouns. And imagine that these are not corpus, these are interview transcripts, these are college essays, these are poems, which are very little language data. And another telling sign that someone is depressed is they use a lot of negative emotion words. Although there are not many empirical evidence that find that depressed patient typically use more negative emotion words, but they continue to be one of the markers of depression till this day. In fact, many researchers argued that depressed individuals tend to use more negative than positive emotion words, and that suggests depressed individuals are inherently more negative, and this marker tends to increase approaching suicide from the research by Sturman and Penbaker. But concerning this, Root et al. 2004, they embarked on a research to find an empirical evidence to support this theory that depressed patients are typically more negative. So they asked some college students who are depression prone, depressed, and also non-effective college students to write an essay, and they found out that indeed depressed students use more negative emotion words compared to non-depressed and non-affective and also depression-prone students. However, this comes with some caveat. Firstly, because all of them are college students, and secondly, it is because the language is structured and not ecologically valid. And more recently, another marker of depression is absolutist words. Absolutist words are actually 19 function words consisting of mostly modal verbs, adverbial intensifier, and these words denote totality in magnitude and probability. And some example of these words are like all, always, everyone, must, never, and nothing. So these words, all of them denote totality in magnitude or probability. There is no in between. There is no gray area. Everything is just black and white. For example, everyone hates me. So it means that everyone hates you and not some people. Okay, so Suicidal Ideation Forum by a study by Al-Mosawi and Johnston 2018 discovered that people with suicidal ideation use more absolutist word compared to those who are uh, who are suffering with anxiety and depression. So it means here that it implies the severity of depression with the prevalence of absolutist thinking or absolutist word in this matter. So, however, the absolutist words were also used more in depression recovery forum than in a mentally healthy individuals forum, suggesting that even though outside their depressive episodes, depression-prone individuals are more likely to have this kind of thinking, and that is this kind of dichotomous or absolutist thinking. Another marker of depression is verbosity. So some researchers found out that depressed patients tend to be more verbose in their in communicating their idea, often with redundant information. So they use more descriptive and informal style rather than analytical and formal style, and they have a high level of abstraction. So they are more abstract than they are objective or concrete. So, and this will manifest in the lack of articles and concrete nouns in their speech or in their writing. Okay, and research on depression detection on social media also found that there was also reduced communication to be a marker of depression. So it means that when someone feels depressed, they are withdrawn from the social media, they are withdrawn from their online social network. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so in order to understand the linguistic markers of depression, it is very it is very important to understand some theories underlying it. And these are some of the theories of depression. The most prominent ones is self-focused attention theory, whereby it posits that depressed patients tend to focus excessively on themselves, that they are unable to go out from that self-regulatory focus, and which will make their depression thrive. So they think about themselves a lot and they think about themselves only. So not in a way that they started to become selfish or anything, but it is a mild adaptive self-focus that a lot of people do not have. Okay, and secondly, related to that is social disintegration theory. Social disintegration theory is actually a result of self-focused attention. It is by Durkheim, 1951. It says that approaching suicide, depressed people will likely disintegrate from the society, and this would actually manifest in their lack of use of first person plural pronoun, that is we words, we as our. Another theory is Beck's cognitive triad theory of depression. Beck's cognitive triad theory of depression says that um, depression is a type of cognitive distortion, and it is made up of negative self-schemas and a pronounced and prolonged negative cognitive bias, which can lead individuals to perceive themselves, the world around them, and the future negatively. Therefore, it is expected that depressed people are more negative because they cannot see any positivity in themselves, in the world around them, and also their future. This is again a cognitive dysfunction because a lot of us or healthy individuals, we have the self-enhancing optimistic bias that they are lack of. So there are lack of actually that positivity in them in a simpler word. But yeah, that is basically what it is. And a cognitive bias can be defined as an exaggerated or irrational thought pattern. And Beck listed 7 types of cognitive bias that are inherent in any levels of depression from mild to severe. And they are arbitrary interpretation whereby you can randomly think that people hate you. Selective extraction, you would only take the negative comments from the positive one. You overgeneralize, you exaggerate, you label inexactly, you are very personal, and also you have this black and white thinking or absolutist thinking. Among all of these 7 types of cognitive biases, only absolutist thinking has been actually explained linguistically and has been explored linguistically by Al-Mosawi and Johnston, which was very recently. So I was interested in finding out if we could actually do the same thing for the other cognitive biases. And if we may, what does it take? So how do we determine linguistic markers? So we determine linguistic, this research particularly uses word counting strategy, which was proposed by Penn-Becker, who actually developed the tool that was used in the study, which is Luke 2015. And actually, there's new version of Luke 2024. But I was not so lucky as to actually finish my research just before they released the 2022 version. Okay, back to the presentation. In the past, most textual analysis method tended to pay attention to the words that carry specific themes, which typically consist of words with meaning or content words such as noun, regular verbs, and adjectives. For example, researchers tended to infer someone's psychological state from the emotion words that they use, based on the assumption that we can detect someone's emotional state by studying the emotion words they use. For example, if someone is sad, it is more likely that we will pay more attention to the sad words that they use. But the problem with emotion words is that emotion words are content words and they are heavily dependent on context. And emotion words can be interpreted in many ways. For example, the word mad. It can be mad about someone. It can mean mad about someone, which is a positive connotation, and a mad, which is a negative connotation. Hence, emotion words are found to be a weak predictor or marker of someone's emotional state. So you cannot tell that if someone uses more of these words, then they are like this. Or if someone uses more of this word, then they are someone like this. So you cannot easily, make conclusion. But Penn-Becker, who was someone who proposed word counting strategy, he argued that the word people use convey psychological information over and above their literal meaning, and it is independent of their semantic context. So he proposed the word counting strategy, and that is counting every single little words in the body of text, including the junk words, the words that we don't pay attention to, that has little to no meaning, such as the pronouns, the articles, the auxiliary verbs, prepositions, and conjunctions. So he considered the style rather than the content of a language as a subtle marker of social and psychological processes. So he was the same person who define linguistic markers and linguistic fingerprints in the beginning of the presentation. And word counting strategy is actually a quantitative analysis of the words that people use in natural setting. Okay, it is based on the assumption that words can be statistically analyzed and that word frequency represents attentional habits. So the words you use tell people around you what you actually mean or who you are referring to or who you are focusing on. So akin to corpus linguistic, both word counting strategy and corpus linguistic utilize word frequency to distinguish to distinguish emerging patterns in lexical or grammatical features in a text. However, corpus linguistic use massive corpora, which I couldn't afford at the moment of doing this research. And word counting strategy, on the other hand, is not limited to counting words in large corpora, but also in smaller scale, like a collection of college essays, poems, or interview transcripts, like have we have seen just now. Okay. So interestingly, when we pay closer attention to all the words in the body of a text and count the words indiscriminately, we will find that function words are a more consistent marker of, sorry, thank you, a more consistent markers of emotional states and social dynamics than content words. Okay, function words are, as we all know, everyone of you here is a linguist, I believe, and function words are a closed word class. For example, pronouns. So there will be no collection to another pronoun, no matter how we try to add another pronoun in the word class. So we could never, all right? And also conjunction and articles. Function word functions like a glue that holds content word together. For example, the coffee is on the table. So function word is the, is, on, the. So I bet nobody actually counts how many the and how many is and how many on is in the sentence, but everyone can count there is one coffee and there is one table, and the meaning is clear. There's one coffee and there's one table. And meanwhile, content words are open word class, so we invent new words every day. And their meaning is open to interpretation as they are depending on context. So the bottom line is function words are often associated with the style of a sentence rather than the meaning, as opposed to content words. And it is used independently of context and almost unconsciously. And that's a reason why it is used almost unconsciously. Let's go and have a look at how it is processed in our brain. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, our function word is processed in a different part of the brain compared to content words. So our function words are processed in our frontal lobe, which is at the broadcast area. And our ability to read social clues and connect with others is linked to our to the same part of our brain. And function words are processed in the broca area that guides our social behavior. And damage to this broca area or the frontal lobe area will likely cause a distinct type of aphasiology that involves relative loss of function words as opposed to content words. It means that you are going to talk without your pronoun and article. You're just going to talk your nouns and your verbs and your adjectives and your adverbs. Function words are also shorter and processed quicker and automatically from compared to compared to content words. Are you okay? Okay. Okay, sorry. Thank you very much.
Uh,
Okay, can we continue?
yeah, one
How
moment,
many
yeah,
minutes?
Miss Hayat.
Okay, no problem.
Let me check the participant. Okay, all right.
Okay,
You can continue
all
for
right. Okay,
however long you need.
sorry. Okay,
Okay.
are we okay? All right, cool.
Yeah.
Provide up. Okay, sorry. Hang on. Okay, back to it. So there's a reason for this. Why function words are processed quicker and more automatically from our brain. It is because Chang and Penbecker postulated that this is because function words are the most important words in our social um, life, and they are related to our ability to read social cues and connect with others. And they carry significant referential, social, and psychological cues. So it means that it is how you actually connect with others, and function words are related to this. And meanwhile, content words are processed in the Wernicke area of the brain. And words such as nouns, regular verbs, adjectives, and most adverbs are processed here. And damage to this area will likely cause someone to speak in function words only, but with no meaning. So definitely you're going to talk all pronouns in article, but you have no meaning. Your speech or your speech has no meaning. Okay, moving on. When we talk about linguistic markers, we are also aware of how our language will change in times of crisis, or our language will change in tandem with the social norms. And previous research has found that social crisis or shared upheavals bring people together. For example, when during the death of Princess Diana, or the 9/11 attack, there were research on how people change the way they talk to each other. And social connection associated with the aftermath of community upheaval will change the way people communicate with each other. All right. And Chung and Penbecker again, they claim that in every study that they conducted involving community upheavals, people's use of first person plural pronouns spiked. So it means that um, that time brings people together. So they talk more of unity. They talk more of social connectedness. And however, what is typical about these shared upheavals, social upheavals, is that people can gather after a few days to provide support to one another. So they had a chance to actually be there for one another, and be a part of the community. However, COVID-19 is very different from the other crises that we have seen since World War II. COVID-19 prohibited people from coming together for months, which extended to years without a clear end date. So all that is was a period of uncertainty, and the social stigma surrounding the virus triggered a climate of distrust. So you don't want to be near people, and you want to socially distance yourself. And this weakened people's sense of collectiveness from each other. However, compared to all the other crises that I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 was compensated by the affordances of um, unlimited social connection online. So they still have their opportunity to be online and to be there for people. And recently, Ashok Kumar and Tanbecker again, 2021, they found that individual social connection has weakened rather than enhance, particularly with the larger community outside their homes. So it means that they found that unlike other community upheaval that happened before, COVID-19 has not shown a sense of togetherness as a result of the during the aftermath of the crisis. And they also reported a very significant, interesting observation. They said there was a decline in analytical linguistic style as the pandemic unfolded. So this linguistic style that is not analytical is a telling sign of a language of people with depression. Okay, next. So finally, these are the research questions. We were interested in finding out how does the use of some linguistic markers that had been identified before, which are first person singular pronouns, negative emotion words, and absolutist words by depressed Twitter users, differ from before and during the pandemic. This study was interested in actually replicating previous research that found elevated use in all of these markers of depression, assuming that words frequencies represent attentional habits. And the severity of depression can be reflected by the frequencies of these linguistic markers used. So it means that if the increase or the decrease is significant, then we can conclude that the depression during the pandemic was more severe than it was before the pandemic. Thus, we will know whether the pandemic had exacerbated the severity of depression of depressed Twitter users or not. We are also interested to explore any emergent linguistic markers that emerged specifically during the pandemic or as a result of the pandemic. So that we can discover the possible impacts of the pandemic on other domains of cognition besides self-focused attention, negativity bias, and also absolutist thinking, like we had undergone earlier. And also regarding shared crisis or regarding a community upheaval, where it was claimed to bring people together, we were also interested to find out whether this was the case with COVID-19. To this end, we will, and we were also interested to see whether there was a diminished analytical thinking during the pandemic by depressed Twitter users only. So it means that we want to see how their mental health has declined as a result of the pandemic. Okay. Why does this matter? It is because studying how linguistic markers change during the pandemic will contribute to the body of research of the psychological impact of prolonged community upheavals to depressed individuals. Okay, next. So this would be the methodology. So this is actually a fully quantitative text analysis research design. It is quite straightforward. The samples are chosen using non-probability purposive sampling, whereby samples were singled out only from tweets from depressed Twitter users. And how do we know that those people were depressed? We tried to search for self-disclosure and mention of antidepressants in Twitter search. So, for example, for self-disclosure, we tried to search for I was diagnosed with MDD, or I was diagnosed with ADHD and MDD, because depression is high in comorbidity. So we would take anyone who mentioned that they were diagnosed with depression at some point of their life. And for the mention of antidepressant, the list was adopted from D. Chowdhury, who listed some commonly prescribed antidepressants such as Zoloft, Lexapro, Luvox, Prozac, Sertraline. And we tried to find all of these mention of the use of personal use of antidepressant, and we singled out them as our samples. these indigenous tweets and tweets that explicitly indicated self-diagnosed depression. For example, I was diagnosed with MDD, or I was self-diagnosed with MDD. So those tweets were ignored. Right. So next, please. So these are some of the examples of tweets that were chosen to be in the study, and some rejected ones that mention self-diagnosed depression. For example, and did you know I've also got depression, self-diagnosed, thought I should mention. So it means that they were not prescribed antidepressant, and they were not clinically depressed. However, this method does not compare with the gold standard of actually diagnosing someone with depression before taking them as samples. So caution has to be taken, because we are now assuming that all of these tweets handles or samples are telling the truth. And this also comes with the limitation that only the public tweets are used for as the sample, and the people who choose to keep their tweets public might not talk, or might not have the same personality with the people who choose to hide their tweets. All right. Next, please. Okay. So then we actually filtered out the sample, and the samples must have met these three criteria. So first criteria is the sample must have joined Twitter before 1st of March 2019. 1st of March is our cut-off date to capture the full year's worth of data from 1st of March to the 2019 to 1st of March 2020. And their number of tweets must be at least 10,000 and above. I will explain this in a bit. And their tweets must be in English. And there are rationale for all of these criteria. Okay, for criteria number one. For criteria number one, that is to make sure that we have got enough data and to ensure the validity of both periods being studied to be equal, like in April and April. The second one is while more data is definitely better for statistical analysis, Biot et al. Recommended a threshold of 10,000 short text containing a sentence or two, such as tweets, or longer text with smaller number of words to be used with Luke, which is our software used in this study. Okay. Another one is because Luke is designed, the next criteria, which is the tweets must be in English. The reason why it is English is because Luke is designed to detect linguistic patterns in English text, and that is the origin of Luke. Although there are a lot of other languages for Luke nowadays, but it is still in their infancy state. And Luke's accuracy and reliability are optimized for English language processing, and that's why. Secondly, English is one of the easiest language to find, and it is widely spoken and used language on social media platform. So therefore, the prevalence of these data will ensure that we have a substantial amount of data available for analysis. So those are the reason and the reason why the samples must have gone through all of these criteria. Okay, next. So basically, this is the summary of the identification, screening, and until the final tweet handles are included for Luke analysis. We had pretty much 152 tweet handles in the beginning, but unfortunately, it went down to 100, and to make it 100 was a struggle, to be honest, because some of them were not fully in English, and some of them had lesser than 10K tweets. All right. So next. Okay, the data collection procedure had undergone this process. after we had, two data sets were collected in the present study, and the advanced Twitter search was employed on each Twitter handle to track their backdated tweets. And the period of 1st of April 2022 to 1st of April 2021. Sorry. Okay, the tweets between the period of 1st March 2020 until the 1st March of 2022, that is the period of 1 month. It was purposefully excluded from the study as the time was considered the buffer period. So that was the time of a high uncertainty whereby some states or some countries were still not in lockdown and some had. So by implementing these processes, a total of 7,013 tweets only were garnered, and for the during data sets, there are only 4,645 tweets were gathered. Yeah, okay. So then the tweets were, sorry, okay. Okay, so then the tweets were downloaded in aggregates and they were saved in a single file respectively to ensure the anonymity of the Twitter user. And it was also scraped by Octopus 8, which is a computer software that allowed us to scrape data from indefinite scrolling on Twitter. Right. So can we please go to the next part? Okay, so these are the tools that we use to measure the significance of the data before and after the pandemic. Okay, so first we use Luke software. Luke software is basically a word counting software. It counts words and then it categorizes the whole text into, I think, 70 subcategories. We didn't use all of the categories in this study. We only focus on some linguistic categories. And the second tool is the output variable information. This information is included with the software. So it came with the software. It is actually a reference list that contains information such as the normal word count, mean word per sentence, and the average linguistic categories on Twitter, for example. So they have already actually found the average number of words, for example, used in Twitter, and what is considered normal in Twitter for the use of first person singular pronouns, for example. And this comparison is actually very important because we didn't have a control group to compare our result to. So this is actually our benchmark of what is considered normal, and what deviates from this normal is considered our marker. So the significance between the data sets were measured using log likelihood. And log likelihood is actually, again, a corpus-based comparative tool, but it is made very user-friendly by recent 2008. So the frequencies of word in the data set were compared to generate the LL value to determine whether the effect size is significant or not. And the higher the LL value, which I'm not going to go through here because those are very mathematical, the more significant it is. The more significant is the difference between the two frequency scores. So log likelihood is used to calculate the significance of quantitative data, but this wizard developed by Rayson can calculate the effect size of data sets which contain as low as 100 words. Okay, and finally, using the word cloud program, we visualize the most prevalent words used in each data set. The visualization was important because we wanted to know the recurring words despite their linguistic categories. All right, next. So these are the words that we had paid attention to. So they include pronouns, function words, other grammars such as common verbs, adjectives, comparison, interrogatives, numbers, quantifiers. Of course, these are just example. Those words that that was listed in the table, and this came from Luke 2015. They call this dictionary. The category is called dictionary, but not in a way that the dictionary that we know, but in a sense that they are actually word lists that belong to a particular linguistic category. Okay. Next. So we have come down to the results. Okay. So these are the results of the study. So we calculated what are the difference between the during data set from the before data set, and we found that there was a decline in the number of tweets by 44%, so which was a lot. And they only used 85,094 words during the pandemic, again, which was a lot. And the average number of words per sentence by depressed Twitter user, although they tweeted lesser, their average number of words actually was had increased. And as you can see, to compare the word per sentence in Twitter, what is considered normal in Twitter was just 12.1. So it means that this result shows that depressed Twitter users tend to write with more words and tend to tweet with more words. Which may or may not reflect something which we are going to discuss further. And we were also interested to find out, next slide please, we are also interested to find out whether they sound less analytic during the pandemic. And yes, they sounded less analytic during the pandemic, but however, the percentile was very minor. It was just less than 1.11 percentile compared to the average Twitter percentile, which is 61.94. This means that a depressed Twitter user, the depressed individuals tweeted with less analytical, much lesser analytical style compared to mentally healthy Twitter users or the average Twitter users. Okay, next. Okay, these are the visual comparison of the before and during data set. If you may have a look for a little while and find, is there any difference between these two data sets? There's none. Actually, they look quite the same. They look almost the same. And it is almost imperceptible. There is no visually obvious difference in the words used across both periods, but the words that are used are what makes it interesting. It is interesting to note that the most prominent words from both data sets are almost the same, and no emerging word about COVID-19 were observed. So it means that they were not even talking much about the pandemic. And as you can see, most words were actually adverbs. Okay, just for example, just is used like as adverb sometimes, like, all, really, today, now. Those words are adverbs. And we will see later that the use of adverbs is very prominent in among depressed individuals. And we can also observe from these data sets or these visualization that they use very little references to concrete nouns. There are very little concrete nouns. And their ideas are mostly abstract. Okay, let's have a look at the tabulation. So next slide, please. So this is the tabulation of the top 10 words before and during data set, in the before and during data set. And just what we saw, actually, there were no obvious difference. Okay, the words in both before and during data set indicate generally abstract ideas with very few references to concrete nouns. We could see from the visualization just now, there were mentions of friends, men, people, and where there were nouns, there were abstract nouns. For example, time. For example, time and also love. But love can also be a verb. Okay, the only one most used concrete nouns out of these 10 words were, the most used concrete noun, okay, from these 10 words is the word people. So that is the only concrete noun that is the most used by depressed Twitter users. However, the word people itself signals lack of social attachment. It is a generic word. When you are referring to people, you say, when you are referring to someone who has nothing to do, you will say people. And considering that the term is generic, it shows that there is a detachment in the way the language is used. Okay, and this is also evident in the prominent use of other indefinite pronouns, such as anyone, which you can see from the visualization, and everyone. Okay, the lack of nouns in both of these word clouds suggests that there was a high degree of abstraction in the tweets in both periods and a low level of concrete reference in which is associated with one of the theories of depression, which was impairment of referential activities, where depressed patients struggle to connect their ideas, to communicate their ideas in words. There was also the prevalence of the word like in both periods, as we can see. While like was frequently used as a verb, for example, I would like to play something, it was just as often used as a filler word, suggesting excess or informality in language in tweets. Unlike, for example, or a preposition to show comparison and conveying complex emotion. So this observation also extends what was found in the previous research that says language of depressed individuals are high in abstraction and informality compared to those without. So this suggests this was telling that they struggle with expressing their complex emotion and experience. And there was also the word now, interestingly. And the word now has increased significantly during the pandemic, which the LL value of 4.43 overused during the pandemic. So the word now could also signal an increased immediacy and a lack of analytical thinking and impulsiveness. So the increase in prevalence could have signaled a further decline in analytical thinking, but this was too early to decide. And yeah, but it signals something impulsive and immediate decision making. Sorry. Next. Another interesting word is that all is an absolutist word, and all is one of the most used word in both data sets. For example, the word all is used to denote totality in magnitude and probability, as I told you earlier. For example, some of the tweets that I got was, "That's not gonna help me at all." So it means that there was no gray area. In 2020, and we are all still surrounded by people. So we're all, a generalization. However, the word just is also another word that is commonly used, and it is consistently used throughout the period. For example, my body just keeps betraying me. So it can just here can be used as an adverb to identify emotion. However, it can also use as minimization of your experience. For example, I would rather just die than hurt one of them. So it is a minimization of experience. However, the word just can also mean fine. I just sent 11 emails. So although these words are used a lot, but the way it is used is very different compared to the absolutist word all. However, although there is no visually noticeable difference in both of the data sets, the top 10 words and actually the word cloud itself may reflect some cognitive impairments associated with people with depression, as we discussed earlier. Next, to answer the first research question, how does the use of linguistic markers that were previously identified differ before and during the pandemic? The result of the study did not show any statistical significance in the use of those linguistic markers. However, there was an increase, a notable increase in first-person singular pronouns and also a consistent decrease in all of the other pronouns, signaling that there was an increase of self-focused attention. There were also a slight decrease in negative emotion words and also quite a significant decrease of absolutist words. So this was unexpected because we expected that the negative experience brought by the pandemic would trigger negative, upsetting, absolutist thinking in depressed individuals. However, we did not see this. The result was kind of surprising because rather than significantly increase the use of absolutist words, almost significantly dropped to a significant level. However, our finding did show that first-person singular pronouns and negative emotion words are used at a much higher rate than the average Twitter users. Next. So as you can see, the use of first-person singular pronoun compared to the average Twitter user is significantly high. Okay. We are going to, and you can also see that there are also a consistent decline of use of all of the other pronouns in comparison with first-person singular pronoun I. Next. There was also a slight decrease in negative emotion words, which was not as we expected, but there was also a significantly high decrease in the positive emotion words. Next. Okay, so the notable increase in the first-person singular pronoun and the consistent decline in other pronoun could signify an increased self-focused attention. However, it is only to a certain degree during the pandemic. This might be explained in two ways. One, it is because previous research compared language of different individuals. The linguistic markers were implied by comparing two different, a non-affective with a depressed individual. So the difference in linguistic style between before the pandemic and during the pandemic periods in terms of the rate of first-person singular pronoun use is comparatively less identifiable than the linguistic markers that distinguish individuals with depression or from those without. Next, in terms of negativity bias, our negative emotion words, it could be explained in, it could be the, one of the reasons could be negative emotion words are content words and they are heavily dependent on context. And for example, in the context of the pandemic, the word positive has a negative connotation, while negative is a positive word. So unlike function words, a content word cannot be assumed, cannot be the significance of a content word cannot be assumed from a quantitative text analysis, and that more negative emotion words indicate more attention to negativity. And it cannot be and it cannot be negativity bias cannot be detected through the use of emotion word per se, because we are only using a probability tool like Leo. However, this can also imply an underlying impairment of referential activity. The decline in both emotion words rather than the increase of negative emotion words during the pandemic is actually quite alarming, because the change in the linguistic behavior is showing a lack of emotionality or a certain degree of apathy. I would like you to reflect on the quote that we read earlier before the presentation about by Bucci, 1982. Next. Okay, compared to both of the other two linguistic markers, absolutist thinking produced the largest effect, although the change was insignificant statistically. This can be explained by the change in social reality during the pandemic did have an impact on the depressed individual's cognition, although it is not significant statistically. And this might be explained because of the cognitive uncertainty posited by Lorette et al., particularly during the initial months of the outbreak. So this type of thinking, although they were so absolute, the condition during the pandemic might have also affected their type of thinking. So they were also affected by the uncertainty brought about by the pandemic. Next. So what do we find then? So what linguistic markers emerge in tweets by depressed Twitter users 1 year into the COVID duration? So firstly, we found a very significant increase of adverbs and also past tense verbs. We also found a significant decrease in first person plural pronouns and a second person pronoun. Second person pronouns are the you word. Next. So these are our conclusions from our finding. We found that there were an increase in the first person plural pronoun and a significant decrease in first person plural pronouns, and the drop in all the other pronouns. So this might imply an increase in self-focused attention and withdrawal from the society. Definitely a withdrawal from the society, if not an increase in self-focused attention. And the decrease in U words, a significant decrease in U words indicates a reduced social activities, considering the nature of social media where people actually talk to one another socially. So there was a reduced social activity and lack of interpersonal conversation between them with other Twitter users during the pandemic. And contrary to studies about shared upheavals, the result demonstrated that it was not the case with COVID-19 pandemic, and this extended the finding from Ashok Kumar and Penbeck to 2021. However, this cannot be concluded. This cannot be concluded exclusive to happen exclusively to depressed individuals, because previous study has reported that mentally healthy individuals also disconnected socially. However, it can be said that the pandemic had indeed exacerbated the impacts of social disintegration in depressed individuals. That is a sure case. Next. Okay, there was also increase in adverbs. during the pandemic. And the increase in adverbs as markers of impairment of referential activities can be interpreted as the tendency to struggle with expressing themselves concisely, and they struggle with high degree of abstraction, as we had seen from the amount of word per sentence, and as we had seen from the word clouds. Individuals with depression commonly use intensifying words to intensify, to emphasize their emotional states, and those words are necessary. And there were also a tendency to minimize or maximize the experience, which are associated with depressed individuals. This very finding is the most significant part of the research, because to date, there is no quantitative studies have reported empirical findings on heightened use of adverbs among depressed individuals. Some studies that adopted qualitative or mixed method analysis have reported that depressed individuals tend to write with higher verbosity. However, they have not explicitly mentioned the specific types of words that contribute to this verbosity. Okay, this is an example of how words are used unnecessarily. And as we can see, the word just is used to minimize experience, as well as it is used as an adverbial as intensifier in these two sentences. I honestly hope my mind is just spiraling and what I think is not true. I just want to rescue so bad, so bad. So they actually try to prolong or try to explain themselves in more words than necessary. However, this can also, the increase in adverb can also be interpreted in such a way that the change of the use of adverbs is highly interrelated with the change of the other linguistic categories. It means that if other linguistic categories such as adverbs or adjectives or verbs increase, then the use of adverbs will also increase, because adverb is a very versatile word class. So any increase in other word category will affect the amount of adverbs used. Next. Then we found that emotion words are markers of apathy. So this was evident from the lack of use of positive emotion word during the pandemic. So making the overall decrease of emotion words used during the pandemic. So they were not significantly less positive than they were more negative during the pandemic. So as expected, we wanted to see more negativity, but the results showed that they were not more negative, but they were actually even less positive during the pandemic. So this may reflect a severe impairment of referential activity, whereby they cannot differentiate whether they are experiencing joy or sorrow. They are just diffused with, the feelings were just diffused and they had no word to explain it. And the decline in both words during the pandemic indicates a general negative impact of the pandemic on their baseline mental health. Okay, next. And last but not least, we also found that there were a significant increase in the use of past tense during the pandemic. And past tense was associated with a past-oriented thinking, and the use of past tense exhibit a stronger inclination towards thinking about the past, particularly during the pandemic. The research has shown that the use of verb tenses signal the temporal focus of attention, your temporal focus of attention. It means that the tenses you use will actually show when are you focusing on. And rumination is also connected to excessive self-focused attention, especially when there is a disparity between current circumstances to their desired state. which was the norm during the pandemic because of the longing of the life before the pandemic. And the prolonged social isolation during the pandemic may have exacerbated the level of self-focused attention. This is evident actually from our notable increase in the first person singular pronoun and evident in the significant decrease in all the other pronouns, especially first person plural pronouns. So this could be the reason why there is an increase in the use of past tense, as there were more frequent rumination as reflected in the heightened use. And the higher prevalence of past tense during pandemic may indicate greater rumination of pre-pandemic life, right? So basically, during the pandemic, they could only think about the past rather than what would happen, how the future would actually be better. Okay, so that's that about the results. And next is the conclusion. So what is the significance of all of this talking? So the implication of this research is that this research attempted to integrate both psychological and social factors that affect the change of language use, particularly among depressed individuals. And we have also seen that although there were only a small increase of first person singular pronoun, it is not as much as the difference between a person who is depressed with a non-depressed person. So the significance of the self-focus is not as severe as to compare with someone without depression. And contrary to expectation, there was no substantial increase in negative emotion word, but however, rather a decrease in positive emotion words, which was more alarming actually, because that indicates a certain amount of apathy. And there was also a notable decrease in the use of absolutist words. Okay, and although it is statistically insignificant, it may be attributed to the cognitive uncertainty brought about by the pandemic, and it challenges even the absolutist thinking patterns of depressed individuals. Next. Okay. The result of the study also shows significant changes in the use of other pronouns, adverbs, positive emotion words, and past tense during the pandemic, which may imply social disintegration, apathy, impairment of referential activity and rumination, which are prevalent in depressed individuals. So these are potential exacerbation of depressive tendencies during the pandemic. The top 10 words in both data sets also show that the absolutist word all remain one of the most used words that may signal absolutist thoughts persist regardless of the context. However, if the word just can be interpreted in the same way, the result may indicate the user's tendency to minimize their emotional experience. But we cannot say, because just is open to interpretation. The study also is the first to show consistent finding in the overuse of word just that may imply minimization, which is a type of cognitive distortion that has not been explored linguistically. Thus, this study supports and extends cognitive theories of depression, such as self-focus and impairment of referential activities. As for the negativity bias, it cannot be proven to be directly linked to the use of negative emotion word in the study. But it is worth noting that examining various linguistic markers will enable us to somehow observe the negative impact of the pandemic on the depressed individual's baseline mental health, which was discovered in the current studies. In the current study, sorry. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much to Ms. Hayat for a very impressive presentation of her research. I think it's most impressive because it's deeply located in the psychology and maybe even some neurology. Okay, so it's not just using psychology to support what she says, but she actually started with theories from psychology in order to, design her study. Okay, so I will open the floor to the participants to ask questions. Okay, and we have one already waiting. Mr. Abdullah asked, how did you collect your data?
Okay, how did I collect my data? Actually, my data was primarily collected from Twitter. And rather than using the Twitter API, which needed me to code and self teach myself how to code, I actually used a software called Octopus 8, which is a data scraping software. I needed to pay for that, a license for that. So, but it is worth it because I managed to scrape the data from the indefinite scrolling. That was, yeah, Octopus, correct. Yeah, somehow I managed, but I was also limited. I was aware that it was also limited to a certain number of tweets only. So I was limited by what was allowed.
Okay, all right.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah. Okay, so we have Dr. Adlina who has raised her hand.
Assalamualaikum
Yes, Dr.
warahmatullahi
please.
wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very much, Sister Hayat, for a very impressive deliberation of your study. Okay, I have two questions actually. Right.
Yeah.
The first one is regarding going back to the data collection just now, because I'm trying to understand how you did the data collection. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So basically, it's from Twitter, and you collected the data from the Twitter, looking at the period before the pandemic and during the pandemic, right?
Exactly.
And so basically, it's not like you're not going to sort of look at individual differences in terms of the use of words, right? You're just going to collect whatever that you can get from the public. Am I right?
Correct.
And then sometime during your presentation, you also did mention that there is a probability that people who are actually depressed, they may not want to make known of their depression. Am I right?
Yeah.
Maybe that is the reason why at the end of your, as a conclusion just now, you mentioned that there is less depressive elements and in the conversation, because there's a possibility that those who are actually very depressed, they may not want to be open to the public.
Yeah,
that's
correct.
That's a comment rather. Okay, my question, my actual question is this. I also noted that when you put up the words according to the categories, the before and during.
Yeah.
Love, the word love appeared a lot. And love only appeared before. Love did not appear during. I'm just wondering, why is it, did you look into, what, love indicating what? Before the pandemic, and why is it that it's not there? Probably it's not there during the pandemic. That's my comment and question, actually. Thank you very much.
That's a very sharp observation, Dr. Adlina. I have been working on this research for, I think, 2 or 3 years now, and I did not actually see that. There was a love before the pandemic, and now there's no more love during the pandemic. So thank you very much for bringing that up. Thank you very much. But I didn't see that. I was only looking for words as classes. And perhaps because it was a positive valence word that I missed it. Thank you very much, Dr. Adlina. I really appreciate that. That was sharp. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you to Dr. Adlina. Mr. Omar, do you have some question you would like to ask as well? Okay, no. Let's see. Okay, Miss Filza, hi Puan Hayat, very interesting study. Was there any comparative analysis in terms of culture among the Twitter users? And in fact, maybe I can write on that question. My question is in terms of pronouns. You know, we have languages that are pronoun drop. For example,
Yeah,
Malay, spoken Malay, we drop our pronouns. So
yeah.
would you expect, you know, some cultural differences,
That was the
cross-cultural difference? Yep.
Yeah, okay. I think that is one of the limitations of this study and how I collected my samples, because those demographic data weren't made available. It was actually entirely depending on their online persona. So we won't know which culture they came from, and also the language was collected and saved as aggregate. So they were mixed up in one data set that we don't know who they are anymore. They are just words. They are just a very long essay. And yeah, so that is something that we should consider as well. That is something that we should consider, that different cultures use different pronouns differently. So that might be yeah. But in the end, these two data sets are containing two very same people. So it means that if they actually, yeah, it comes down to the same thing, I think, because the same people will tend to use more or less within a period of a year. So that must have actually indicating something, must have indicated something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Mr.
Oh,
Mr. Iyadi. Yeah.
sorry,
Oh, okay.
my mic
Okay.
wasn't working. My question about the data collection, I meant by how did you sort those people? Those people are feeling depressed during the COVID. How did you know those accounts? I didn't mean by the tool. For example, there is a lot of people that feels depressed, or that's what I meant. Like, it's too random, or by hashtag. Did you use the locate, like a, you know, it's kind of complicated on Twitter.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Omar. Okay. I actually used the Twitter advanced search, the Twitter search, to search for phrases that I was diagnosed with MDD, and also the mention of personal use of antidepressants. So basically, from this search, I would choose the latest tweets, so that they happen in recent years. So in the period of analyzing the data, they were depressed because it happened at the top, the latest part of the of the search results. So that is how actually I wrote it in my paper, but not in the presentation. And that's a very good question to clarify. How do I um, ensure that these people that I am looking at are currently depressed, or on antidepressant? But then again, it is so limited to their truthfulness. So provided that they are um, telling the truth, then we can use it, right? Madam Afida, yes, I will give you my DOI number.
Mr. Iyadi also has a question.
Hello,
Okay.
Assalamualaikum,
Assalamualaikum.
Miss Hayat.
Yes.
Yes, okay. I think Dr. Adlina has mentioned about the word. I think there are a lot of potential of your study in looking at the issue that you are trying to look into. All right. So someone asked just now, you know, actually you can have a look on into the
Yeah,
demographic on how the culture are difference between in looking at the depressions and also the suicidal thoughts. I think
yeah,
I think um, I think there is one corpus tool that you can actually extract the data out, and then from the Twitter, and then you can actually look into the location of the Twitter.
I
So
see.
yes,
Thanks.
yes.
Do you
Okay,
remember?
you.
Do you remember
I'm not
the name
sure.
of the
I will.
corpus?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think most of the I have to ask other MCRN members, or probably I have to ask straight away from Prof. Dato Imran on the corpus tool that he's doing. You know, he's looking at the demographic, whereby you can actually look into the culture and how they are. They are so. But I'm just giving a suggestion here, right? So it's very good research, and then I like how Dr. Adlina saw that, and I also saw that the word love is, you should actually look into that love words, instead of all the negative words. You can actually look into the comparison, the comparison between the negative words and the positive words before and after the pandemic, on how the mental issue was, is very staggering. I would say that. Okay, so yeah, I like your. It's just that there's so much potential. I think looking at the comparison, you look into the demographic analysis as well. But I'll try to get. Maybe I'll try to ask Dr. Anis and probably others from UKM, and straight away ask Dr. Prof. Dato Imran on the tool that actually can, because I can't remember, but Prof. Dato Imran actually told me about the tool, but it's very expensive. I don't know how you can pay for it. Maybe you can ask for grants later on. Uh,
Most
yes, yeah,
probably.
yeah, because like once you extract the data out, you can actually look into the locations of that particular tweets. It's
I
very
see.
easy for you. So most of the time, you can see how the demographic influence their thoughts. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much,
So that is my
Mr.
suggestions,
Thank you very much. May I leave my
All
email
right,
here
thank
so
you
that
very.
you can. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Actually, there's another question from Dr. Afida, but we have 13 minutes left, so I think we should proceed. But Hayat, do have a look. I think it's also an interesting question about semantic prosody, whether there is a possibility to look from that angle. Okay, all right. So again, thank you very much to Ms. Hayat for a very insightful presentation. I think all of us enjoyed it very much. So should we take a picture first to commemorate this this moment? Okay. So I invite all participants to open your cameras. Okay. Any more would like to be featured in the picture? Touch gallery. Okay, let me take a picture. Okay, we're still loading. All right, I will take the first picture now. You can smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, everyone.